Hey, welcome back. Okay, so this is part 2 of the video for making the oil burners. We'll start by trimming this one here. I'll give you a few tips on that and show you how to do that. So we're going to trim it so it has a little foot ring down in the bottom, kind of like this. We'll trim the excess off down here and do a foot ring in there. Okay, so we'll show you how to do that. If you've done this before, you'll know that sometimes the wire releases the pot before the wire's gone all the way through, so you get a little pad of clay left on your tile because it always resticks, right? And a little spot higher on this pot. It's a little bit tricky to trim that if you're using a trimming tool, because the trimming tool can sort of bounce around on that instead of making it nice and flat. So I'll show you a tool that we can use to help that. Okay, so first thing we want to do, before we flip it over, we're going to flip it over and center it and fasten it down to the wheel head. We want to know, though, where the clay is, right? We have to determine how thick the bottom is, so we know how much to take off and where it starts to get thicker out here. We want to make that determination of how thick the wall is, and you can sort of run your fingers down, one inside, one outside. And sort of, if you can position yourself in such a way that you can see how far apart your fingers are, that's a good thing. What we want to do is where it starts to get thicker down there, which is right about here. I'm just going to mark that with my nail. And now as far as the floor goes, I know that I have a good thick floor, so there's no problem at all trimming a foot ring into that. The amount of clay that you're left with down there is going to determine whether you can have a foot ring or not. Okay, first we're going to center it. Okay, so we'll just put it like that. And don't worry, in the early days, you know, your pots might be dancing all over the place. Don't worry about what it's doing anywhere down here. It's only right here that matters. It's only where you're going to be trimming it, right, that matters. That's the only spot that has to be centered. So you can see when the pot's doing this, if you're just sort of holding your finger here, you just want to hold your finger stationary, and all you're looking for here is just for the pot to be touching your finger lightly as it spins around. Whenever we trim, we want to make sure it's centered. We want to fasten it down really well. You don't need to be really stingy with the clay when you're doing this. I find that if there's ever going to be a problem with the pots coming loose, it's usually because there's not enough clay holding it down. So I just never worry about that. And you don't want to use your good clay for that either. So I'm going to hold it firmly down, and I'm going to push the clay nice and firm down into the wheel head. Okay, and then gently into the pot, just gently. We'll talk about when the pots are ready to trim as well. If you unwrap it and feel that the pot is still a little tacky, then it's too wet. It's not ready for trimming. If it doesn't feel tacky, you can just sort of take your finger and thumb and just do a little moving like that on the rim. If it feels like the rim wants to move really easy, also not ready for trimming, you want it to feel nice and solid. And if those two criteria are met, then it's ready to support its own weight upside down and rest on the rim. And doing this, if you try to do this when the pot's too wet and you're pushing the clay in, you're going to warp the pot and all that. Plus, trimming a pot when it's too wet, there's lots of reasons why pots want to crack, right? They all want to crack. And one way they can, that just adds to the numbers, to the percentages, is if you trim a pot when it's too wet still, right? If the bottom's moving sort of up and down, you trim it, it's okay, it looks okay, you flip it over, you push the bottom back in so it's nice. Not that it's going to crack every time, but you've opened the door for it to crack, right? You've increased the percentage that it has to crack if you trim it when it's too wet. So a good tool to have, I have all my trimming tools here, all my favorite tools right by my wheel. This one is a good one too. So I keep them nice and handy. If you were to start trimming now, the trimming tool might just go up and down with this little extra pad of clay. So a great tool to add to your collection is this little rasp. Okay, just a little rasp. These are used for drywall. I believe, and they come in a couple of different sizes, and they come with handles. You don't need the handles, so I just buy the replacement bits at the hardware store or something. So the teeth go in one particular direction, right? So with the wheel spinning like this, I can just hold this lightly over top, and you can see that it just skims that high part off, right? And it's really easy. It's really good tool for getting the bottom even. And also in the early days, you'll notice that the bottoms can be quite chunky on your pots. This is really good for that as well. It's a lot easier to start trimming on a pot that's even instead of chunks sticking out. So on the side, it would just be something like this, right? Until it's nice and even. Okay. So now I know I'm going to find my mark here on the outside, which is right here. I want the foot ring to be, like, if I can imagine this curve continuing on without this piece here, I think the pot would probably come into about here, right? And so that's where I want to mark for my foot ring. So I'm just going to take my pin tool, and as the wheel's spinning, I'm going to do all the work, by the way, of the trimming with the trimming tools in this, right from the 3 o'clock line. Okay, so center dot to 3 o'clock. Anywhere that I trim on the pot, whether it's here, 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 it's going to be along that 3 o'clock line. The wheel's coming up from underneath the tools, so we hold them like this, and as it comes into the tools, it's able to cut them off perfectly. Okay, so always on that 3 o'clock line. So I'm going to mark the spot where I want the foot ring. Looks like my other tool already made a little bit of a mark. So I'm just going to hold nice and steady, and you'll notice that always when it's throwing, trimming, anything, our arms are always on our legs, right? Hands are always touching, we're always nice and secure, and we're just going to lightly mark it with the pin tool. So I can say that that's the outside of the foot ring, and we'll say that that's going to be the inside of the foot ring, okay? So that we know that all that's going to be left here is this part. Right, that will be the foot ring. That will be the part sticking up. The clay on this side of it's going to go, the clay inside here is going to go, and that will remain. What I'm going to do is first I want to establish the wall on the outside of the foot ring. There's a couple of different ways to go about this. You can go at it from the side or go at it from the top. Either way, it's good. There's some instances where it won't be very easy to do one or the other, so just choose accordingly. Right, with this one, I'm just gonna, and again, nice and secure, both hands, right, 3 o'clock. Speed is good when trimming. You have more control when you go a little bit faster. If you go too slow, it's a lot easier for the tools to dig in and not get a nice even cut. Okay, so you can see I'm just going straight down there now. And of course, when you're going this speed, and this is another reason why a lot of clay down here is good, because you know the pot's not going anywhere. It's really nice and secure, right? So you can go a high speed and it's no problem. And this is the way you want the clay to be peeling away, right? If you're peeling the clay away and it's just wettish and it's sticking to the pot and it's all gummy and stuff, you know that it's just not ready to trim. And just be patient. Don't trim too early. So going in from the side, it looks something like this. Okay, so we'll find that mark, and there it is right here. So between the area between the bottom of the foot ring, right here, and this mark, I'm going to curve, right? I want to follow this curve here, that shape, right into the bottom of the foot ring. Okay, so holding the tool again at 3 o'clock, just on like a 45-degree angle now, and we can just get rid of the clay. In the beginning, like we have to count on our judgment, right? For how thick we remember the pot being. if you get a little bit nervous, which happens in the early days that you might go through, just a little bit of gentle pressure on it if you're getting nervous, and you'll be able to feel if it's getting thin or not. If it feels really rock solid, you know you got lots of clay to work with. You can also do tapping it, right? And you can tell by the sound. And when it's really getting thin, you can tell, right? A deeper thud, still lots of clay. Really light sound, which I don't have there yet, but I'll do it again once we get there. So that's another good way to tell how much clay you have. So I'm just going to go down a little bit further here. And we'll try it now and just see if you can feel. Can you hear that difference? Right, quite a bit thicker there, right? So I know I'm getting a little thinner up here. So that's good. I don't have too much more to do inside here, so I'll just even it out. If you like seeing glazing, throwing lines, glazes to break over them and stuff at this point, if you wanted to do ridge or something like that, you can just take the back end of the trimming tool and just sort of bring it down like that. Right, and you can see the ridges there, if you like. Okay, so now just going to make sure this is nice and even as well, and then I can go at the inside of that. So again, holding nice and steady, right? And we want to establish that inside wall. Right along that 3 o'clock line, and you want to just sort of inch your way into the middle, and not cross over. We don't want to go out towards 9 o'clock. The clay coming into the dull side of the tool won't do anything. So we're always over here. We always want to follow the shape of the outside, or sorry, of the inside of the pot on the outside. So if we have a flat bottom on the inside, we want the foot ring, the clay inside the foot ring here to be flat. If we have a bowl that's curved on the inside, we want the foot ring to also be curved to mimic the shape, and that helps keep the wall and the floor of the pot even and the same thickness all the way around. I'm going to take just a little bit more off, and then we'll move on to the next piece. When we finish trimming, we'll keep the glazing in mind always, right? So we want to make sure that the surface is smooth. Okay, there's a lot of glazes that don't like scratch marks. There's a lot of glaze that are left from the trimming tools. There's a lot of glazes that don't like grog. So we want to make the surface of the pot nice and smooth. We want to make sure we do that before we wrap it up. All right, and you want smooth edges, or sorry, yeah, smooth edges. Yes, here on the foot rings or anywhere on the pot. Actually, you don't want it to be too sharp. Okay, so for smoothing it, we'll just get our rib again, and we can hold it at 3 o'clock, right there like that. Bring it in towards the middle. To do the foot ring part, we can just sort of bend it around the edge. All right, and bend it around, and that makes it really, really nice and smooth as well. Like a nice rounded foot ring. It's really awesome. Okay, and then, whoops, and then in here, right, we can try to get that tool in there like that. And then as far as these go, you can do this just by running your finger down there, right, and following it down each time. You could also try, if it's the right size, to get the rib in there as well. And then you're making the surface nice and smooth with no scratchy areas, and that'll be the glaze will be really happy that you did that. I'm just going to get rid of the little bits in here. Sometimes there's little bits left over in here, and they can be a little bit of a nuisance to get rid of. So it's good. I don't have one right here with me, but it's always good to have a paintbrush nearby so you can just scoop those out as the wheel's spinning. Okay, so there you go with that part. This one, as you know, once we trim the other part, we're going to do the cuts in here, right? We're going to cut slits out or holes or any patterns you want to put in there, and then have an opening at the back of it where we're going to slip the tea light in. Okay, so I'll take this off and I'll get set up for the dish, and we'll trim the dish next. Again, cut it off the tile, a little chunk of clay gets left behind, right? So the rasp always going to be good for that. So when we made the dish, we wanted to make sure that we left the clay, in this part at least, the right thickness, so we don't have to trim any off. That way it'll be easier to fasten down. And with this piece, we're going to trim it the same way we'd trim a lid, where it's not going to be a flat bottom, no foot ring or anything. It's just going to be one continuous dome, right? Just to follow the shape that we have going on in here, and then it's going to sit in here when it's all said and done, right? So that's what we're concerned with. So again, before we put it on the wheel upside down, we want to make sure we know how thick that bottom is, right? And then here we want to know where it starts to get thick again, which is not very far. We know it's like right here. Okay, and then from here to the middle, which I'm going to take a little bit of clay off in the middle, but not a whole lot. So between this line here and the middle, I'm going to make the whole piece a dome. Okay, and we should be able to do that fairly easily with this shape. Go there. I'll take my bits of clay. Now with this one, we obviously are not going to need pieces that big. And I also don't want to have the clay on the outside here too high, right? Because I need to get down there with the trimming tools. So again, holding firmly in place, right? Putting the clay around there and then pushing firmly down into the wheel head, right? And then gently into the pot. So to get rid of this unevenness here and this chunk on the side, again, I'm going to use the trimming tool. So this one, the small one, we're going to hold like at 3 or 4 o'clock, right, with one hand, and just sort of hold it like this, right? And it takes off the high part. If we're using the bigger ones, don't get the ones that are bigger than this. There's ones that are twice as long as this, and they're just, you bend them and they just break. They're too big. So this one we're going to hold this one at 6 o'clock instead, bend it a little bit, and hold it above until it skims off that extra high piece. And that's nice and even. This one's actually pretty dull. I think I need a new one. So I'm going to go back to the small one here. So we'll go over here to the trimming tools. You can see now that it started to round. I can see my mark right here, so I know it gets thick here. So between here and here, that's where I'm going to have the dome shape go from, right? So I'm going to hold again nice and steady, be nice and solid. I'm going to go down here and then just go around the corner on that angle, and then just gradually move it in. Whether you go from the outside to the inside or the inside to the outside doesn't really matter in a lot of circumstances, this one being one. Okay, so I'll go ahead and finish trimming this. And once I get the shape, I'll do the smoothing again, get it nice and smooth. But in this instance, it's going to be covered up. It's going to be inside here, so it's not as important. But I'll still do this anyways, just because I do. All right, so we'll do that, and then we'll come back to the next piece to trim. Sneak peek into the future and see what this is going to look like. So you can see both pieces are trimmed now. We'll get it all lined up. We'll do the cutting and everything. And we'll turn this into an oil burner. Link these here, right? Okay, so here we are with the pieces all trimmed. As we noted, this is what it's gonna look like this. So first we have to cut a little dome there. Give us the space to put the tea light. get that set up. I like to work on a sponge like that with a hole. It makes it a lot easier to control and not have to get suspended in your hand or anything. And then on the little Lazy Susan also helps. Okay, so we'll start by marking where I want that little dome to be. I'm just going to mark it with a pencil. Then I can do that. So now that I have it marked, I'm going to take the X-Acto knife. X-Acto knife is the best tool I find to use for these things. Go straight across. This is the rough cut first, and then we'll clean it up afterwards if we need to. So we'll just come around the dome here like that. And we'll just pop it out. Okay, so now we have that, and I also wanted to make sure that the bottom of the opening here is a little higher than the floor in the pot, so that the tea light will actually go in it and not sit. Let's say that I want to do something like this, like that, maybe a circle there, something like that, and then let's just see, that one can go a little higher probably, and then maybe something like that or something. I can go ahead and start cutting. So I'll start with the middle. I'm going to support also when I'm working with this. I'm going to support it as I go. Right, I'm putting a little pressure here. So I'm just going to hold it securely here so that I don't dent the pot or anything like that or crush it. So I'll just come down like that. Cut that piece out. And of course, you're going to do any design you like. I'll just show you a few different things, a few different options you have for the tools that you're going to be working with. So then again, down here. If you like, perfection or symmetry, then you might want to measure these things. For me, I sort of embrace the random. So I'll leave it like that, and then we'll do the side here. And again, so when I'm coming closer to the existing hole, I'm going to support that. I'm going to hold it with my finger on the inside, my thumb on the outside as I cut, right? And that'll hold the clay in place and make it less likely for it to snap off, because it wouldn't be that difficult to snap off at this point. When you're doing these cutouts, you want it to be at a stage in leather hard where it's pretty rock solid, but not so dry that it would snap easily. Okay, so then once you have the cuts, you can pop it out. Good to have these little Q-tip things are good to be able to push on pieces so you can get them out. There we go. Right, that's a rough cut, and you'll see the importance of going back and cleaning these cuts up later. So that first of all is using the X-Acto knife. I'll put a few. I can use a few circles in there as well. So this is a great tool for cutting circles out. They also sell tools that look like this for cutting pieces out. The advantage of ones like this is you can get different size holes, right? Instead of having a whole slew of different tools, different size holes, this one here, the holes that you can make vary depending on how far you stick this in, right? So if you stick it in only this far, you get holes that size. And up here you can see you get bigger ones. So it's basically a little bit of a knife on two sides. You just stick it in there like that and turn as you go. And as I say, the depth that you go will determine the size of the hole that you make. All right, so these are And you can vary up the size of the holes, which I like to do. And again, random. I like random. Sort of do that. There's also tools that you can use if you wanted to do cutouts, squares, or anything, and you didn't want to use an X-Acto knife. They also have tools like this. All right, so this is a square punch, and I'll just put that in there like that. Go all the way through, and then when you bring it out, actually a lot of times it's just left here, and then this you can pop it out here, but it fell out by itself, so that's good. Okay, so now I will continue. I will continue this pattern. I'll do this pattern again over on the side, over on this side, and then fill in the extra areas with holes and squares and stuff. Okay, so we'll carry on doing that. Okay, so now you can see what it's going to look like in the end. All right, sort of like that, and then now we have a space to get the tea lights in and out in here. Okay, now very important, this next step. This is where you just take your time and do this, because like the old saying goes, excellence is in the details. This is where you really want to fine tune this piece, okay? And you have to really clean out the holes and make sure the designs are nice and smooth as well. Okay, so a good way to do that. I have a pin tool here, and I also have some Q-tips, right? These long Q-tips. So these are good. I have just a little bit of slippy water here, and for the holes here, I can just sort of go in, spin a bit, right? Sort of like that. For the edges on here, I can do that with this as well. That's one tool you can use for that. If there's little bits, and usually there would be little bits on the inside, you can take them out with a trimming tool. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that, but anything that's any little bits that are inside, you can just sort of run the trimming tool like that and get the edges off. So there's that as well. And the greatest tool of all for cleaning these things out, and you have to get one of these, is these little makeup sponges. They are awesome. So you can see, I'll just wet it. The sponge is very dense, so we'll just go like this, and it sort of gets both sides of the line at the same time. And then for the holes, of course, just turning it like that. So you can see that this one here is probably the best tool for that. Okay, so we'll go around and we'll meticulously see and make sure that everything is nice and even. Okay, so now we're ready to attach the top. So we'll end up looking something like this. Just make sure that that's level. I'm going to hold it in place. And turn it upside down and place it on my Lazy Susan. Now I'm just going to go and mark it lightly with my pin tool all the way around. Right, and I know that that is where it's going to join. So we'll pull this off right? And we see that line there now. So from here up, I know there's contact from about here to, about here. So up to about there, and then down this far in here, I'm going to scratch up the surface. Okay, and then we're going to glue it together. So first of all, I'll do this. These tools are excellent for that. Just these scoring tools here. You can use a pin tool as well. Do some cross hatching. It just takes an awful lot longer to do. So we'll just do this. And so we'll get our vinegar over here. I'm going to scratch up this surface too. Okay, and then we'll dab the vinegar in there. All the way around like that. Same on here. Get it into the scratches nicely. And we'll give it another little rough scratch again. Vinegar. Vinegar is so useful. There's so many uses for it around the house. And again there. I'm going to place it on the outside line that I had. Okay, and I can move it for a few minutes. I can still move it around and make sure it's right in the right place. You have a couple of minutes to do this, and then it is just going to stick and you won't be able to move it anymore. Okay, so it's on there. You want to make sure that it's level. So now what I'm going to do is just take the brush, and there's probably going to be some scratches exposed, so I'm just going to take the brush and go around that seam with the vinegar. Okay, don't get it too soaked. You don't want the vinegar running down and spilling all over the place. So get some vinegar on there and sort of tap it off a bit so it doesn't run after you do this, but you want this right in the joint. And this is the same, this is great for attaching anything on any pot, handles, knobs for lids, anything like that. Vinegar is so awesome. Okay, so there we go. And here's the finished piece. Now, there's a couple of different ways you can go about finishing it further, if you like. If you don't mind seeing this join here, right, and making it obvious to people that it's two pieces joined together, then you can just leave it like this. All right. So here's an example of that on this one here, not hidden. You can try also to hide it. So this one over here, you can see that it's smoothed up and it all appears like one piece. And I believe, yes, on this one too. So this is a finished one with a tea light in there, so you can see what it looks like. And what I have melting in here is a chunk of beeswax from an old beeswax candle that was finished. Little chunk in there, and now I get to keep enjoying the smell of beeswax. But this one is all smoothed in as well to make it look all like one piece. Okay, and if you wanted to do that from here, then it would just be a matter of making a coil, right? A coil of clay, scratching up the surface again. I'm going to leave this one like this. Scratching up the surface again with the scoring tool, right, all the way around here, and then taking the brush, going around it again with the brush, and then attaching the coil to it all the way around. Okay, so that's what you do with that, and then just smooth the coil in all the way around as you go. Okay, and then you'd be done. Okay, so here you go, finished oil burner with the tea light going in the back, attached, trimmed, patterns cut out, the tools that you use for that, the finished product, a product in action, and you are all ready to go. So for now, peace, love.